When President Obama several years ago made the so-called nuclear deal with Iran, I lukewarmly supported this action on two premises. First off, the foreign policy of United States is the prerogative of the president anyhow, so let him do his thing the way he sees fit, presumably in the best interests of the country and the world. And secondly, it was hoped that uh, after years of sanctions had bitten more and more seriously into the Iran's inner condition, domestic situation, that the Tehran regime would be inclined to make concessions on its own part and respond to international community's willingness to cooperate and patch up and bridge the differences in kind. Now that President Trump has decided to withdraw from this agreement, I support this step wholeheartedly. The hopes for tyranny current regime improving its conduct went up in smoke. Uh, as that song goes, give peace a chance. We gave peace a chance and it didn't work out. The mullahcracy has taken kindness for weakness, and instead of both softening its stance in domestic affairs and tempering its foreign policy, has done exactly opposite. It keeps intruding and increases its intrusion, its meddling in the affairs of its neighbors such as Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen. It keeps threatening Israel and Saudi Arabia. Uh, and in such situation, it appears that this decision is quite well founded, especially backed up by the tons of evidence laid out recently by Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. I think the Europeans that have come out uh, in criticism of President Trump's action are misguided, if well intentioned. They want peace, but you cannot really achieve lasting peace by appeasing an aggressor, by appeasing a tyrant. They want to peacefully trade and explore economic cooperation with Iran, but they fail to realize that that cooperation would be open to much grander scale once there would be some serious regime change. And regime change in Iran is possible. President Obama, while I semi supported his nuclear deal, he passed up a great opportunity to topple Iranian regime, or at least try to do so, in the very first year of his presidency back in 2009. Actually, I'm wearing this green shirt today, t-shirt, uh, in commemoration of that titanic effort by Iranian people uh, who came very close to bringing in a sweeping tsunami of change, even if formally the presidential candidate they supported and who probably won that election was a part of the Iranian elite. But then the split in elites, the conflict within elite, is often a precursor to a revolution or some other serious change in any society. And at the start of this year, we saw a new round, perhaps numerically smaller, but more interesting and more widespread unrest in Iran. Sorry. This arrest I predicted a year ago when Rouhani was elected to second presidential term. I wrote in my Russian language blog that this is gonna solve nothing and strengthen no positions of either Rouhani or the regime in general. And Rouhani, as we know, is a sort of a kind of a liberal within this otherwise quite a totalitarian regime. I had wrote that Iran is facing increasing, mounting amount of challenges, including those posed by the relative opening of relations with the outside world. We are seeing that. We are seeing that the economic situation, social situation has not really improved. while the aspirations of people are still there. We're seeing that now the protest is not limited to large cities, it has spread to smaller ones and taken to those social stratas that traditionally were considered the backbone, the base of this regime, the more conservative, more religiously minded, perhaps older part of Iranian population. Uh, Applying more pressure from outside, unlike some dovish, misguidedly and overly dovish people think, will spur the change inside the country when a regime realizes that it simply cannot conduct its affairs in the way it has done before. The Europeans who are wishing for peaceful relations and trade with Iran, perhaps buying its gas and oil and selling them a bunch of Airbuses, uh, should realize that the opportunities for economic cooperation with such a regime are always very limited, whereas a possible regime change, whether complete replacement or a serious evolution, a serious essential change of this regime and its policies, would open absolutely incomparably broader opportunities for both political process in the region and for economic development. Uh, and besides, let's recall how the European, especially the so called old European nations, conducted themselves 15 years ago during the Second War in Iraq. France and Germany came out swinging against that action, but once Saddam Hussein was deposed, they were among the first ones to rush into taking advantage of the new opportunities that were opened up in that country. Uh, Iranian regime has refused to cut its act, even in the face of increasing difficulties that it faces and that by and large have been self inflicted. Somebody has to take issue with that. Somebody has to punish the violator of peace and order in the region and in broader world. Let's not forget that Iranian regime has been implicated in some uh, destabilizing and outright criminal actions far outside its territory, such as the 1994 bombing of a Jewish center in Buenos Aires, half a world away. Considering all this, I hope that President Trump's decision is correct one. I hope that in short time, perhaps in a couple years, as the American sanctions are brought back in place and Iranian people grow more and more restless with what is going on with their country, there will be healthy forces, both inside and outside current Iranian regime, that will inflict and effect true change both in domestic order and international stance of this nation. And it's no wonder that somebody like Vladimir Putin is gonna stick up and put all his four limbs into trying to save this arrangement. Because if there is a serious, massive political change in Iran, the whole Kremlin Tehran alliance is going to crumble. Mr. Putin is gonna lose one of the main culprits and one of the main accomplices in stirring trouble on international level. And what annoys Mr. Putin pleases me.